I'm your host, Alex Jones, sitting in for Texas Frontline. Today, I want to go over nuclear threats, chemical, biological threats to the American people that the media and the government that controls it have been hyping and pushing. I also want to get into the latest developments concerning the London bombings of 10 or 11 days ago. And we're going to take your phone calls. In fact, we're going to take your phone calls coming up here in about 15, 20 minutes for the second half of the show. And if you're watching us on July 18th, 2005, the toll-free number to call in is 477-2288. If you're watching this later on the internet at prisonplanet.tv, you're always welcome to call in with live questions on my syndicated radio broadcast that I do Monday through Friday from 11 to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Genesis Communications Radio Network. All right. Before I get into the nuclear threat, before I get into the fear-mongering of the government, before I get into the situation in London, every couple days we see articles along similar lines of the two articles I'm about to show you. We have giant archives on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com full of these stories where the mainstream media admits the truth, where government documents are being reported on. But it never makes the big nightly news, and Joe Sixpack and Sally Soccer Mom are never told to protect themselves, so they don't. And my point is, if our government will test chemicals and biologicals on our own troops, killing and maiming them over the last 50 years, still ongoing, if our government will do all of these horrible things to American citizens, then what will they do to citizens of the West to blame foreign enemies and have a pretext for global empire and trillions of dollars of assets that they'll be able to basically steal from foreign countries? So really it's about ceasing to be naive. You know, for so many years I have warned people about different types of fluoride. And the media will tell you, the dominant controlled media, that sodium fluoride and calcium fluoride and all these fluorides are good for you. And yes, it's true. Calcium fluoride found naturally in the water in trace amounts is good for you. So is arsenic. So is cyanide. You need just microscopic amounts of this for normal cellular communication and action. But in even moderate levels, arsenic or cyanide will kill you and is very, very bad for you. But there's this joke in society. After the 1945 and the end of World War II, there were all of these toxic waste dumps all over the world, all over the Western world, where governments had stockpiled the toxic waste from the leftover aluminum production facilities. And so a byproduct of aluminum purification and manufacturing is sodium fluoride and other toxic stannous fluoride, other forms of fluoride. It's also a byproduct of petroleum-based fertilizers. And so there were all these warehouses all over Germany, all over England, all over Russia, all over the United States, full of sodium fluoride and other types of fluoride, many times mixed in with a cocktail of other toxic elements. And so what did they do? They had a PR campaign in the late 1940s about how great fluoride was for your teeth, and put out newspaper articles saying only kooks are against it. they're these crazies that think it's part of the Red Menace, to control your mind. Not only were these different types of fluoride a toxic waste that was very expensive to store, it also did have a toxic sedative effect when people ingested it. And documents came out. I mean, this is in, mainstream university studies. Famous books about World War II have been written, award-winning, some of the most famous books out there about how the Nazis controlled some of their occupied populations. And they would put sodium fluoride into the water, stannous fluoride into the water. Now, that's admitted. And so you go see a great film like Dr. Strangelove by Stanley Kubrick, and the crazy man who's going to nuke the world, the crazy General Jack T. Ripper, this guy, he is obsessed with fluoridation. And so anybody that thinks fluoridation is bad is evil and is probably going to kill you. And so I remember hearing this 10, 12 years ago, and I was just waking up to the global system, to the matrix. So I started doing research, and I found Chinese studies, Irish studies, British studies, German studies, a whole bunch of studies done in the 20s, 30s, and 40s at the University of Texas, where they found that giving high levels of fluoride to rats would make them become docile and toxic and they die, and where they found that it had all these different effects and how deadly it was and how once it's in the environment, it's really hard to get rid of. So I have this news article out of the BBC, and this isn't concerning fluoride. This is concerning sweetener, aspartame, linked to leukemia. And I've got this article out of the Associated Press posted on prisonplanet.com. Harvard professor investigated in fluoride research flap. And every day I see articles like this. I mean, it's admitted what sodium fluoride does. It's admitted what aspartame does. Immediately breaks down in the body into wood alcohol. Everybody knows wood alcohol is very toxic. It is a excitotoxin. It has an amphetamine, a speed type effect on the nervous system, and it also is very, very toxic and very, very destructive. I mean, back in the bathtub gin days of Prohibition, if you drank just a few ounces of wood alcohol, you go blind. Sweetener linked to leukemias, and it says the colleagues at the Cancer Research Center in Bologna fed 8-week-old rats varying concentrations of aspartame, it as NutraSweet or equal, compared with controlled rats given no sweetener. Many of the female rats in the experiment developed lymphomas or leukemias. The risk increased with those doses of aspartame. And it goes on to talk about how this major study, like all the other major studies, show how dangerous it is. Who was the guy at Monsanto when they got aspartame approved in the early 1980s? Donald Rumsfeld. Who was the guy at Monsanto who got the Terminator genes approved to be planted in open air? Donald Rumsfeld. And now, because the patent's been up for about 5 years on aspartame, it isn't just in a few soft drinks. It is now in over 9,000 plus packaged foods and food lines on store shelves in the United States. In fact, just a few years ago, juicy fruit that I would occasionally chew, I'm not a big gum chewer, just had sugar in it. Now you read juicy fruit, it has sugar and aspartame. It's very hard to find a chewing gum, even when it has sugar, that doesn't have aspartame. Why? because it's many times cheaper than aspartame. Aspartame is many times cheaper than sugar, and it is 200 times sweeter. And so it's just cheap. Now, of course, your cat or your dog wants to drink antifreeze. That doesn't mean that antifreeze is good. Just because antifreeze is extremely sweet doesn't mean you should go to Walmart and get a gallon of it and pour it in your iced tea. If you do, you're going to die. You're going to have total kidney failure and liver failure. It is sweet, though. Rather than spend all day on this, I just thought I would mention it to you. I mean, I know most of you out there watching know that sodium fluoride and stannous fluoride is very dangerous. I know most of you know aspartame is dangerous. But do you care enough about yourself and your family to start filtering your water properly? You know, most filters don't cut out fluoride. You need to find out which ones do. Did you know that aspartame is in 9,000? Those numbers were a few years old. I'm told it's even more now, but upwards of 10,000, over 9,000 different foods. Do you care enough about your children to start reading what's on the package? I mean, can you do that for your family? Or, since you heard Rush Limbaugh and read a few news articles joking about crazy tinfoil hat people that are scared of fluoride and scary tinfoil hat people that say aspartame is bad. You know, we warned you for many years that mercury in the vaccines was very dangerous. And then 2 years ago, they said, don't worry, we've taken the mercury out. That's not true. We have the Associated Press on my websites admitting they actually increased the mercury level in most of the vaccines. And then we got the CDC documents from 2000 declassified. That is, Dan Burton's committee was able to get them in 2003. And since then, it's broken, where it's the minutes of the top CDC scientist saying, my God, this mercury's brain damaged millions of people. I'm not going to let my children or my grandchildren take vaccines. I'm not going to do it. So these are the type of issues that we need to discuss and be aware of. I mean, you don't have to believe me, but your health is at peril. We had one child out of 25,000 22 years ago. One child out of 25,000 a few decades ago had autism. Now it's one child out of 168. And that is an overdiagnosis. When I was a child, I didn't know what autism was. I never saw an autistic child. Today, most public schools have entire warehouses, entire classrooms where they warehouse these children, where they literally stack them up. There, you see autistic children at the mall. You see them in movie theaters, and so many prominent people, well-known billionaires and members of Congress, their grandchildren, their children are fine, happy, playing, catching the ball at 18 months, climbing on the jungle gym. They go get their last round of shots, their 35th and 37th and 40th shot, and they have a seizure and then are doing this forever. It's because it builds up and burns through the cerebral cortex. So this is admitted. And my question to you is, do you care? Do you want to be involved? Do you want to realize that in a cold-blooded way, the establishment knows this is hurting you. They knew it was hurting you when they approved it. They knew serotonin reuptake inhibitors, when they approved them, caused massive increases in suicide and were very toxic to the body. They knew when they approved aspartame that it was very toxic to the body. They knew when they had the toxic waste fluoride and its different derivatives of fluoride that they were going to put it in the water and it would be toxic and make you more docile. They knew depleted uranium when they used it in Serbia and Iraq again and Afghanistan and 10 proving grounds in the United States. They knew that that was going to hurt you. They knew that that was going to hurt the troops, and they still do it. Here's the Associated Press article, and then I'll get into the terror news. Harvard professor investigated in fluoride research flap. Harvard University is investigating an allegation that a dentistry professor downplayed research showing an increased risk of bone cancer for boys who drink fluoridated tap water. And he did a National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences study from 1992 until 1999. And it only showed a slight increase in boys that drink fluoridated water in bone cancer. But now his own graduate students have gone public who supervised and did the study and are saying that he knowingly falsified the fact that it actually caused a massive increase in the bone cancers. Douglas's 92-99 study, but Elsie Basson, a doctoral student with Douglas supervised, reported in her 2001 thesis that boys who drank fluoride water appeared to have an increased risk of developing the bone cancer. Her findings were based on some of the same people used in Douglas's study. The environmental watchdog group, an advocacy group based in Washington, D.C., filed an ethics complaint against Douglas last month after discovering that Douglas cited Basson's research in his final grant report. In it, he said her work supported his claims that there was no significant risk from fluoridated water, even though Basson had found a strong link between fluoride levels in tap water and an increased osteosarcoma risk for boys. Now, I'm not going to go on anymore, but we have the Nobel laureate who studied fluoride for 30-something years, winning a Nobel Prize, showing that it increased a bunch of different types of cancer. Folks, the head dentist, who's also has several other doctorates, he was the head dentist, for the government in Canada. 12 years ago, he was instrumental in calling people kooks and calling people liars and saying that it didn't, that fluoride's good for your teeth. Last year, and I've since interviewed him, he went public and said, I apologize. I'm totally wrong. I meant good calcium fluoride in toothpaste. I'm so sorry, I was wrong. They're putting toxic waste in our water. They're taking the stuff from the aluminum plants and from the fertilizer plants mixed with a cocktail of other deadly substances, calling it stannous fluoride, and putting it in our water. And my God, I've seen all the studies. This stuff is deadly. And industry has simply lobbied us so they can sell us a toxic waste rather than have to store this toxic waste. It's the same thing. DU is a toxic waste from nuclear power plant production rods, from producing the rods. What do? In the 70s, they say, man, this stuff shoots through tanks great, or this stuff's great for armor, for body armor. We'll just put it in the munitions. And then the Army studies it in the 1980s and goes, this stuff is deadly radioactive, heavy metal. It goes into the lungs. It kills people. We can't use this. They say, we're not going to issue those field manuals to warn the troops. We're going to use this. So this is your government. This is the corporations. This is the establishment. This is what they think of you. On the London bombing, all I can say is this. It's clearly a government inside job. Why do I say that? Because it's been proven that the Madrid bombings of 3/11 were an inside job. The British and American government has been caught carrying out over 100 plus bombings from 1969 up until 1980 with Operation Gladio that concluded with the Bologna bombing that killed 85 people and was carried out by the CIA. Now that's mainstream news and that's admitted. But again, back in the newspaper. The British government from 1980 until 2000 was caught carrying out bombings in Northern Ireland and in England as a pretext to keep the war going between the North and South, between Irish Catholics and Irish Protestants. That is admitted. That is public. They carried out bombings. They commanded terror squads. The terrorists didn't even know that they were working for MI5, MI6, and SAS Special Air Services. Understand, it wasn't just that the British had moles inside to control things. The heads of the groups were British intelligence, cracking heads that people didn't carry out terror. And again, who has the motive? Who gets more control? Who gets to expand their control? Here's the Times of London. Terror laws face easy ride and climate of cooperation. After the attack, now, why, there's this cooperation. There's all this, everybody's willing to give up their liberties now. Terror hunt to take decades. It's never going to end. We have other articles here where they're trying now to pass the Patriot Act, saying, see, we need to expand the Patriot Act because of what happened in England. They're saying we need the EU now to give you security to stop the terrorists. We have those articles. It's the same MO over and over and over again. And we have the government with a private company doing drills at the exact same bus stations, exact same train stations, at the exact same time the terrorist attacks took place. But in the drill, it was simultaneous attacks, and the media said, well, the attacks weren't simultaneous. Then 3 days later, we learn that indeed the attacks were simultaneous. You've got these guys who have 8-month-old babies, aren't particularly religious. They teach disabled children. Magically getting together with these backpacks, going onto these buses, simultaneously the bus blew up later, simultaneously going onto these trains, these explosions go off, and the passports, the ID cards get left unscathed on all of their seats, and they bought round-trip tickets, and, all of this happened. And now it turns out they were being watched by MI6 and MI5, and they may have been connected to groups that the British were using to infiltrate the terrorists. From our evidence, we believe they were hired to take part in the drills, and that they were told they had dummy explosives, and that the explosives were really real. This is what the globalists do. They love to set up a patsy who thinks they're part of a drill and who thinks they're, and again, this is exactly what happened on 9/11 with the supposed hijackers. We know they thought they were part of drills. We know that in the Madrid bombing, there was a big police presence and people on the ground, and quote, it was for a drill. We know that when Putin got caught planting bombs, his FSB in a fourth building, they told Moscow police it was just a drill. So this is the same MO. It's the perfect cover story. But as if that isn't enough, we're having the fear hyped, and we're being told that there are 1,000 suicide bombers, maybe 50,000. ABC News says 1,000 suicide bombers, which is Boulder Dash. Now, some of the neocon publications are saying hundreds of thousands. Why? There's terror bombers everywhere. More than 1,000 people with possible terror ties in the United States, explosives readily available. Meanwhile, WorldNet Daily and Fox News and everybody, we're going to get nuked any minute. Why? There's all these experts all over talk radio. We're going to get nuked. Al-Qaeda snuck nukes across the border. And here's the article. Al-Qaeda nukes already in U.S. Terrorist bombs smuggled across Mexico border by MS-13 gangsters. Now let me stop right there. Since the fall of the supposed Soviet Union back in 1991, with Alexander Lebed and others telling us that upwards of 24 suitcase nukes had been sold by the former Soviet blocs to Muslim extremists in Afghanistan and in other areas of the world. Now, let's just look at this on face value. The U.S. government has had over a $20 billion budget. Over a $20 billion budget in the last 12 to 15 years to buy and to pay to have nuclear weapons scrapped. They'll pay millions of dollars per device to have them scrapped. Do you really think that there's Russian generals off selling suitcase nukes or strategic theater weapons, small tactical nukes? Do you think they're really out selling those? Number two, frogs or artillery type nuclear or atomic munitions and suitcase type munitions are extremely unreliable, even though most of them are atomic, because with an atomic device, they simply fire a bullet of plutonium into a block of uranium. You don't get the same effect, the same yield, but still, even with those devices, they don't last more than 10 years. They're very unreliable after a few years. They have to constantly be upgraded. And look, it'd be fun for me to get up here and fearmonger and tell you we're going to be nuked any minute because Al-Qaeda is going to drink our blood, basically, and it's all over if we don't give control of our lives over to the New World Order. That is patently false. That is a fraud. And we will put the number up on screen, by the way. If you want to call in, we're going to put 477-2288 up on the screen if you're watching July 18th, 2005, and we will take your calls. So we'll be putting that phone number up in just a moment. Now, this is a complex issue because the government, through their intermediaries and through their henchmen, through their surrogates, runs around telling us that we're going to be nuked, not a question of if but when. They run around telling us we will have biologicals released on us, not a question of if but when. But at the same time, our borders, north and south, are wide open. We have less people on the border today than we did before 9/11. You may hear a little newscast telling you Bush is beefing the border up. It's actually the opposite. And we get these reports where the Mexican gangs are going to nuke us any minute. Now, I think that a device being detonated, whether it's a dirty bomb or, God forbid, an atomic or hydrogen device, I think that that is in the cards. I know who will do it, too. Who has the know-how, who has the wherewithal, who has the will. I know who has the motive. If a U.S. city ever gets nuked, there will be a national draft. There will be a lockdown police state that we will never emerge from. We will literally be shaved-headed slaves of the government. We will be marched out across the world to invade dozens and dozens and dozens, 65 to be precise, third world countries. The globalists, the military-industrial complex, wants to take control. They don't want just the banks and the shopping malls and the car dealerships and the biotech firms and the computer companies. They want total control over our daily lives. They want a cashless society control grid. They have the motive. They want to capture the American people as their slaves to invade the planet. We have official government documents where they say they want terrorism. And if they blow up, a third of Chicago with a suitcase nuke and radiate the rest of it, or if they do that in Dallas, or God forbid Austin, Texas, which I believe is a major target, if they do that, it's over. Our futures are over. Can you imagine the hornet's nest Hitler would have stirred up if he'd have had atomic weapons in 1933 and would have A-bombed Berlin and blamed it on the Russians instead of just firebombing the Reichstag? He would have gotten America on his side. He would have gotten England on his side to attack Russia and take over the planet. It's simple. The globalists will take a big one on the chin, build up the military complex, totally take over society. They're all lined up. They're all prepared to do it right now. In a big way. And I know your calls are coming in. I don't think they're being answered. We haven't put the number up on screen. I'm not sure why. But we will get to your calls coming up here in a few minutes. Now, just so people can hopefully get a grasp on this, this is insane. This is insane. Al-Qaeda nukes already in U.S., terrorist bombs smuggled across Mexico border by MS-13 gangsters. As London recovers from the latest deadly Al-Qaeda attack, I love it, last week, 3 days after the attack, WorldNet Daily was saying it was an Al-Qaeda attack that killed at least 50 top U.S. government. Again, as London recovers from the latest deadly Al-Qaeda attack that killed at least 50 top U.S. government officials. That is written strangely. It doesn't roll off the tongue properly. As London recovers from the latest deadly Al-Qaeda attack that killed at least 50, top U.S. government officials are contemplating what they consider to be an inevitable and much bigger assault on America. One likely to kill millions, destroy the economy, and fundamentally alter the course of history. According to captured Al-Qaeda leaders and documents, the plan is called American Hiroshima and involves the multiple detonations of nuclear weapons already smuggled into U.S. over the Mexican border with the help of MS-13 street gangs and other organized crime groups. Folks, MS-13 is openly controlled by Los Zetas. Los Zetas is admittedly trained by the CIA at the School of Americas and being trained not just at Fort Benning, Georgia, but in South Texas right now. They're running hit squads all over Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Southern California, killing drug dealers that don't pay their cut into CIA-controlled cartels. They are openly protected. Certainly, you could say that MS-13 and Los Zetas could help Al-Qaeda because they do bring across tens of thousands of Muslims a year. You could say that, yeah, they're the ones pre-positioning suitcase nukes, but that's ridiculous, folks. Every time the globalist agenda is in trouble, Al-Qaeda pops up and agrees with Bush. Saddam's going, don't attack me. I've always fought Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's U.S. government. No, I'm not with Al-Qaeda. Colin Powell gets up before the Senate and goes, there's a new videotape on Al Jazeera where Al-Qaeda says they are working with Saddam. And they go, excuse me, that's not on TV yet. And he goes, oh, well, it will be. Oh, yes, I'm with Saddam. Invade. Always there. Who has the motive for terror? Who gets to invade countries? Who gets you all stirred up like a beehive? And yes, folks, there's Radio Free Austin. 96.3 in North Austin. 90.1 in South Austin. And 100.1 isn't on the air right now. So I don't know, we ought to have that up. But those are local micro broadcasters. Mainstream media would call them pirate. But they do pick up my commercial radio show from 11 to 2 during the day. Thanks, guys. Yeah, we're not on a commercial station here in Austin, though it is a commercial radio show. And but we are on those stations. You can always listen at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com as well. But we have this foggy threat of suitcase nukes that they've been sowing into the consciousness for 15 years. And the Russians did have a Spetsnaz plan to pre-deploy suitcase nukes in America. But if nukes go off, folks, I assure you it's not some group of Muslims that are doing it because they bought a suitcase nuke in a Cracker Jack box. I assure you that is not the case. And these things, again, are a lot bigger than a suitcase. But you want to talk about a real threat, though. Why has our government given China the latest missile systems and MIRV technologies to hit the U.S.? Why have they helped give this to North Korea? Why is Israel doing this? But, you and I have to be watched by the police, and the police have to have checkpoints now to search our cars, but not the border, because Al-Qaeda might get us. It's a bunch of bull. It's about the government letting us know that we're basically their slaves. I know we have loaded phone lines. Your calls are coming up. China, Russia issue joint statement on New World Order. This is out of the People's Daily, the major newspaper of Communist China. And I know Rush Limbaugh says the New World Order doesn't exist, but China, Russia issue joint statement on New World Order, saying they should control it, not the evil Americans. So see, now the debate is, do you want a U.S. Britain New World Order or a Chinese Russian New World Order? When in truth, it's the EU that's running and owning both sides. It's the two wings. They always give you false choices. And so they can have the Soviet arm or the new reformed, whatever you want to call it, arm, the oligarch arm of the Soviets, the neo-Soviets, go steal countries, take over, engage in militarization, and then they can have the U.S. do it with the other arm. And then Europe and the private owners, they never get the blame. Oh, I don't know what these hydras are doing. They're causing problems. They're fighting with each other. But it's like, but look what they're attached to. Can't you see, folks? They're attached to this. They're attached to the body and the head of the New World Order. Whole countries, whole corporate structures are just fingers on its system. Top Chinese general warns U.S. over attack. And so the top Chinese general, he's debatably number 2 or number 3, he says that if we do anything to dispute Taiwan, I have his quotes. They gave an official press conference in front of hundreds of members of the press last Thursday, and he said, we will destroy 200 of your cities. If the Americans are determined to interfere, we will be determined to respond, said General Zhu, who is also a professor of China's National Defense University. We will prepare ourselves for the destruction of all the cities east of Xi'an. Of course, the Americans will have to be prepared for hundreds of their cities will be destroyed by the Chinese. And he said that if we target any of their facilities, any of their ships, anything, we will be nuked. And thanks to the Republican companies and Bill Clinton, who was told to do it by the Republicans. You know, Bill Clinton was an evil traitor when he gave a few supercomputers to China, but Bush took all restrictions off, and he's hailed as a conservative. Alberto Gonzales is pro-abortion, but he's hailed as conservative. He's anti-gun, but he's hailed as conservative. Bush has our borders wide open, but he's hailed as conservative. And when there is a terror attack, conservatives are saying, hey, he'll be impeached when there's a terror attack, and they say it came across the border. No, he'll be praised. There'll be no discussion of that. Here's another one. Top Chinese general warns U.S. over an attack. So this is Financial Times of London, and it's also here out of MSN. So while they've got cops out running checkpoints on I-35 and at the airport, we just need to search your car, man. There's been an attack in London. Don't give me lip. I'm protecting you by taking your rights. The border is wide open. 2,000 less Border Patrol on the southern border, a couple hundred less on the northern border. And the Border Patrol's been ordered to stand down. That's mainstream news. They want these third world. Okay, I said we go to your calls. We will go to your calls now. And if the nuke goes off or if a suitcase bomb goes off, you know who's got the motive. You know who's done it in the past. We forget that. Who's done this in the past? Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Just a minute. Let me turn. Yeah. Hello, Alex. I'm watching your program.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I have a question. Years ago, I met a man up in Ocean City, Maryland, where I had a condo, and he told me about the 50 families that rule the world. And I think it was you that I also heard that there was also 100 families. Before you answer my question, I want to listen to what you have to say about it. Have you ever heard of anything about 50 families that rule the world? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we know who those families are. And a lot of people go, well, you give conflicting information. Is it 13 royal bloodlines? Is it 50? Is it 100? It's like in a ship. You've got the captain. You've got, his first mate. You've got the different lieutenants. And then you've got a whole other area of the ship, the master of the ship who just deals with the... We know who the top families are. The Oppenheimers, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. They're the big endowments. They're the big tax-free foundations. They own the private stock in the Federal Reserve. They are the ones, David Rockefeller wrote an autobiography 2 years ago, and I've got a copy of it, and he says, world government's good, we're going to take over, it's for your best interest, world taxation, if that's a conspiracy, so be it. Really, all of this is secret because the average person doesn't read the autobiographies, of Helmut Schmidt or George Shultz or, the people that have the world diamond monopoly. The Oppenheimers, who also own Nokia. It's the Crumps. It's the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas. It's the same old, the Habsburgs. It's the same old names, and they're all interrelated. They all marry each other, and they're unbelievably ruthless. And but about 200 years ago, royalty learned to act like they didn't have power. And so they're who owns the major tabloids in London other than Rupert Murdoch? The royal family. The Queen's next to youngest son, I forget his name. He owns the major tabloids, the major TV production company that makes fun of his own family. See, it's all by design. And it's a close second. It's either the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, and that's three families, the Saxe, the Coburgs, and the Gothas. So that's why, the average person in England doesn't even know the name. It's just, that's the House of Windsor. That's Queen Elizabeth. See, that's the control. The average British subject doesn't even know the name of their queen. Their real names are kept very quiet. You're allowed to know her first name, and that's enough for you. That's their power. That maybe 1 out of 1,000 people knows the name. These people are so powerful, you don't even know their names. Well, it's Saxe, Coburg, Gotha. So that's their power. They're so powerful. They're so powerful. We don't even, their names are public, but you don't know it. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Alex, how you doing?
Pretty good.
I just wanted to ask you a quick question about, you were talking about China and how there was the general that had been making, comments about nuclear weapons and whatnot.
Well, no, they called an official Communist Party press conference, and then he came out and told them.
All right. Well, I'm just curious what your opinion is about, conflicts with China and the U.S. And I heard you talking about, how the EU is possibly controlling both sides or whatever. But, how do you see that in the near future affecting the U.S. and China relations?
Well, it's a great question. Ordered out of chaos. The globalists created World War I and World War II just to create a crisis, just so they could bring in fear and control, so they could centralize power, so they could arm both sides. And it's the same thing. Look, all of our industry is being shipped over there. Bush Sr. was the first ambassador when they opened China back up. Henry Kissinger. All these people. It's the same MO over and over and over and over again. They bring these people in. They set them up. China is the model. 1,300,000,000 people, and the government executes you like that if they want to. There's no freedom of speech. They love it. And so America is being looted. America is being subdivided. They're just strip mining us right now. There's a wild dash to seize the private property, to jack up the taxes, to regulate the living daylights out of us, to dumb us down. And China has been the leverage, the economic engine to do that. And European shareholders are the predominant owners of this country. And it's really sad to see this happening. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, Alex, I heard you say that Austin you thought was a likely target for a nuke. I was just wondering what your reasoning on that was.
Well, I'm not saying Austin's going to be nuked. I'm not saying Austin's going to be car bombed or that bioweapons will be released. The government's saying not a question of if but when. And from all of my intel, real intel, and what's even been in the mainstream press, the I-35 corridor is a major target in Texas. Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. Bush's handlers would love to have an attack on Austin and claim Al-Qaeda did it because it's Bush's home state. I just see that in the cards from a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, but also just because it fits. I don't think that's going to happen. The CFR keeps saying Dallas, Denver, Cleveland, Chicago. Look for somewhere in the Midwest. And we're done with calls. Sorry we're out of time. Great job to the crew. I was honored to come in and sit in on Texas Frontline. And I will be back tomorrow night from 7 to 8 p.m. Channel 10. And then Wednesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. on Channel 10. And I take each of the TV shows we do each week and we post them on prisonplanet.tv. And we also re-air them here on Channel 10 and 16 in Austin, Texas. All these channels are still here. And, again, the radio show is from 9 to midnight Central Time at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. And during the day, 11 to 2, you can hear it on 90.1 and 96.3 and 100.1 as soon as it's, I guess, back up. But the whole war on terror is a fraud. They're saying give up all your liberties. But illegal aliens get more tuition than citizens. You know that they get out of jail free cards. They get arrested and get released. That's been in the local papers. Illegal aliens are basically first-class citizens. We're third-class citizens. And government, well, they're God. They're sovereigns. They're the officials, the authorities. We're the servants. We're the slaves. That's all for our own good, of course. So the war on terror is a complete and total fraud. First and foremost, because the borders are wide open. God bless you all. Take care.